session, we thought it was important for us to have this session so that we have an opportunity to have a discussion with yourselves following a discussion that we had in Cabinet regarding the investment plan and some of the issues that and activities we've been involved with or in following the discussion at Cabinet. So this for us is very important. It is also important ahead of our trip to Egypt at COP27, which Mr. Musa, as you correctly say, I will also be attending to represent our country and our people, together with a number of ministers and officials. It's a very important gathering of the world, really. You might recall that exactly a year ago to this day, I addressed a special session at COP26. I did so on the virtual platform, COP26 in Glasgow, on the topic of accelerating a just and inclusive energy transition. Much as I wasn't there and present with other leaders, I said then that while the energy transition is necessary for reducing global carbon emissions, the transition that we have to embark on must be a fair and a just one. That commitment to a just transition has remained at the very center of our agenda as government, and indeed in the work of this commission. And I must once again commend you, Deputy Chair, and the commission for the excellent work that has been done thus far in executing the mandate that I passed on to the commission when I appointed you. As we gather here today, our country is confronted with three interrelated crises. We face a shortfall in electricity supply, which has caused our economy immense damage and continues to destroy jobs and livelihoods. It's put a number of businesses in great difficulty. Some have had to shut down. So this is a real crisis, and its enormity is widespread throughout the country. The other overbearing crisis is that we face unacceptable levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, which strain the very fabric of our society in ways that are just so heavy on the people of our country. And thirdly, we face the critical and urgent threat of climate change, the effects of which we are already experiencing in South Africa, in that we continue to face all the calamities that are given rise by climate change. On the east of our country, we have continuous flooding that destroys public infrastructure, that destroys homes of our people, businesses, and just devastates the life of our people. And on the western side, we face the specter, almost on an annual basis, of continued droughts. We must confront and overcome these challenges, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of future generations and what we do now to address these challenges is going to have an impact on future generations. Today, on the threshold and the eve of COP27, we have decided that we should release South Africa's Just Energy Transition Investment Plan for discussion, as I said in the National Assembly yesterday, for discussion amongst our people, and also principally also for discussion by the Commission. This is a plan that we're putting out for that purpose, and thereafter we expect suggestions, views to be put forward, and indeed we expect that the discussion will be widespread as to involve as many of our people as possible. This plan outlines the scale of need and the investments that will be required to achieve our decarbonization commitments, and to do so while promoting sustainable development and ensuring a just transition for our country, and in particular for our people, as in workers, as in communities, and vulnerable people who are going to be directly impacted as we execute this plan. But it must also be a just transition that also has an impact on the social life of our people, on the economic life of our country, on businesses, and various categories of the people of our country. The investment plan, which we will be releasing for discussions, provides us with what I would call a blueprint to address these three challenges, recognizing that they are indeed inseparable and must be seen and addressed in totality. It is about addressing the global risks of climate change, which we experience annually, while also ensuring that as we navigate our way through this transition, we create jobs, new jobs, in new sectors that are going to have to accompany our transition as we move forward. But also, this must be based on our key objective of ensuring that there is inclusive economic growth in our country. The investment plan was in the end developed in a process that demonstrated country ownership and leadership and ensured careful regard to South Africa's ambitions and priorities. Now, it includes a portfolio of investments across a number of priority sectors, principally the electricity sector, the green hydrogen sector, and the new energy vehicles, as well as initiatives to ensure a just transition. This plan is firmly rooted in the Just Transition Framework, which was developed through widespread consultation, communities and organizations across the country, and was adopted by Cabinet in August of this year. So it is very much a part and parcel of this process of consultation and discussions. And it is for this reason that It has to be released for discussion, for consultation, for views, and everything else that goes with consensus building. Now, this framework stresses that workers and communities must share in the benefits of the climate transition and the creation of new industries, new sectors, and jobs if we are to fulfill our commitment to leaving no one behind. When I was answering questions yesterday in the National Assembly, I did say, we have embraced and adopted this leaving no one behind concept, not only as political speak, but as an important concept which
All right, you're listening to President Cyril Ramaphosa there. He's addressing, of course, the Presidential Climate Commission at a special sitting on the eve of COP17, of course, saying that discussing the release of South Africa's Just Energy Transition Plan, setting out government's priority investment and financing interventions under the Just Energy Transition. He says, we face a critical and urgent threat of climate change and that the commitment of just energy transition remains at the center of government's plans. Let's take you back there live now.
A long-term look, and they go to 2050. They say that we are going to need much more money, and they are right, they are correct. This is just in the 5 years that a 1.5 trillion rand will be necessary. And going forward, much more money will be needed. Now, this includes investing in our transmission and distribution networks in areas such as the Northern Cape, expanding renewable energy sources to achieve energy security, building local production capacity and infrastructure in new sectors such as green hydrogen, electric vehicles, and investing in local economies to develop skills and enable economic diversification. Now, in essence, this investment plan is the first of its kind globally, in both scale and ambition. It provides a vision of a future South Africa which is a leading player in a new low-carbon global economy. In developing our plan, we consulted, as I said, many stakeholders and involved relevant technical experts on the needs of key societal groups such as youth, business, civil society, labor, faith-based organizations, local government, and indeed a number of institutions. These engagements will continue during the implementation phase of the investment plan, and they will be based on what will also come out of the consultation process. Now, the quality of this plan is testament to the deep knowledge, expertise, and capability that exists in our country, in civil society, in academia, and elsewhere. And the good thing is that we've involved some of the best brains in our country who have made a real meaningful contribution. I wish to thank the Interministerial Committee under the leadership of Ministers Crises, Gungubele, Mantashe, Godongwana, Patel, Godan, and Pando. They have provided political leadership to this Presidential Climate Finance Task Team, led by former Deputy Governor of our Central Bank, Mr. Daniel Minele, the Secretariat for the Just Energy Transition Partnership, led by Ms. Joanne Yawich, and the many individuals and organizations that have contributed over the past year to this effort. Achieving the pathway set out in the investment plan will require substantial financial support from developed economies as part of their global financing obligations. The plan makes it clear, and I'd like to say, even as you read the executive summary, it makes it clear that the scale of funding that is required to achieve our country's ambition is significantly higher, much higher than the funding that has been offered through the Just Energy Transition Partnership that we launched together with our international partners at COP26. Now we're working with our international partners to identify additional funding and financing sources to meet outstanding needs. While the initial funding committed by partner countries will play an important catalytic role, it is not sufficient to meet the scale of our ambition. And in going to COP27, that's precisely the message that we will be taking forward. Supporting a just transition requires adequate financial support that must include a significantly larger grant funding component to ensure the implementation of active labor market policies, reskilling, upskilling, as well as the creation of new industries on a considerable scale. I am currently
Of course, that was President Cyril Ramaphosa addressing the Presidential Climate Commission at a special sitting, discussing the release of the South Africa's Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, saying that it's a first of its kind globally in terms of scale and vision. Let's see if we have him back now.
I have stressed that the component of the grant funding is far lower, much lower than what we need to fund our transition. We are a country that is already heavily burdened with debt, and I've communicated very, very clearly to them and will be having further discussions with them. And they've been rather open and willing to listen to us on this quest for more funding, because our plan can really only be fully and properly executed if there is more grant funding and if there is more funding made available in the form of concessional loans, as well as investment packages that can be put forward. Now, I should say, in fairness to some of these partners, they have come forward to say yes, they are willing and prepared to make more proposals, to put more proposals on the table. Our path towards a just energy transition cannot be separated from the need to deliver real progress and practical climate actions on the priority issues for Africa and other developing economies. Deputy Chair, you are absolutely right with your opening remarks in saying that we have seen the more developed economies, particularly in this period of this conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, moving more and more towards utilizing fossil fuels, which it is said the whole world should move away from. And we've seen them even going back to utilization and some of them reopening of some of their coal-fired power stations. But we also remember that the promise that was put out in Paris, that they would make available up to $100 billion a year so that all of us can transit in a much more effective way in terms of the support that we need, the mitigation that should be there, and how we should adapt. That promise was never really fulfilled. Now, even as we move forward, as we should, given the exposure we have to climate change, we remember what has happened in the recent past. And it is for this reason that we are emboldened to argue and agitate for more funding, even within the parameters of the deal that was struck in COP26 for the $8.5 billion, and which we say, much as it is welcome, it is not enough, and the grant funding thereof also needs to be upgraded. So we need to see significant progress on adaptation, support, mitigation in the whole process as we deal with the impact of climate change on our own country. We have an obligation to hold developed economies accountable by making sure that they do honor the financial commitments that they undertook in Paris, as I said. So that, for us, is critical. And that is the message that we will be taking to COP27. The key challenge for South Africa and our sister countries on the continent is access to new at scale. And that is the message that we will be taking to COP27. The key challenge for South Africa and our sister countries on the continent is access to new at-scale and predictable funding that does not further exacerbate our debt crises. Many of our countries, our own included, carry inordinately high levels of debt. We are pleased with the level of interest already shown by other countries in supporting South Africa's energy transition journey. We are at an advanced stage of engagement with other governments beyond International Partners Group and are looking to progress discussions with other interested parties. And let me say, these discussions will be held with a view of advancing our own national interests and the interests of our people. We are also encouraged by the level of interest from philanthropic organizations and are looking forward to working with them. And a number of them have come forward and in a way encouraged by the very, very bold and positive step that we have taken in putting forward our own position, our own national contribution, determined contribution. Now, by releasing this plan, we are placing the ball firmly in the court of the international community, particularly your developed economy countries that have through their own industrialization, through their own advancement of their economies, contributed greatly to the damage of our climate, who through the emissions that they have contributed to into the atmosphere, to a large extent have brought us where we are. In the end, no one can doubt our boldness, our level of ambition, and our commitment to doing our part to address the global challenge of climate change. Following the launch of this investment plan for discussions, an implementation plan will be developed to maintain momentum and ensure we deliver on our commitment. Now, that implementation plan will follow in the wake of the various views that will be put forward. As was the case with the investment plan, the implementation plan will be led by the South African government and our social partners. It will be developed in accordance with our self-determined climate policy goals as outlined in our NDC, so as to ensure a structured, phased, and well-sequenced transition process. What remains is to ensure that we have the support, the funding, and the capability to translate our vision into reality. This task will require strong collaboration amongst all of us as South Africans. It will also require ongoing engagement to continually strengthen and adapt the plan as a living document as further inputs are made that will serve the interests of the people of our country. It will need each of us to play our part, and this commission is an important structure that will also be playing a key role. Now let us take the next step on this long journey with determination, with hope, and with solidarity. I have no doubt whatsoever that the work that the Commission is doing will contribute greatly to embolden our position, but also to embolden our standing in the world, on our continent, as we continue to traverse this path of addressing the challenge of climate change. And I do believe, Deputy Chair, that working together and doing all what needs to be done together will be able to outline the broad parameters of this plan, which, as I said, we will be putting out so that we can have the discussions and the consultation that is needed. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the discussions and to the inputs so that we can also be much clearer as we go to Egypt on what message we need to be transmitting to the world. Thank you very much.
All right, and we exited just as it began buffering again. That was President Cyril Ramaphosa talking ahead of COP27 in Egypt. And of course, South Africa has a plan, the just transition, all about moving from dirty coal energy to clean renewable energy, outlining sort of the stance that South Africa will take into this meeting around climate change, and bringing up again the whole debate of what the rich developed countries should do for developing nations, since they began with emissions much earlier and it was much more intense, and that is why we find ourselves in the situation that we are in. And this, of course, is huge for South Africa. There is funding for things, for example, what Eskom is doing, turning around a coal station and making it something that creates renewable energy. There are funding, global funders willing to step in. The question is, what are the strings attached, and does it conform to South Africa's plan? So these are just some of the issues being raised ahead of that meeting in Egypt.